That's where it begins. Because when you see someone sweat, and you see someone, banging up their knuckles, and you see someone, get out of their, frustrated mind and how to operate this piece of equipment, and then, work in the rain and in the mud and help us recover a farm. And in the meantime, they're learning they're studying the laws that we are complying with. So their mind is like opening up to, whoa, I had no idea that this is how you do it and how you do it correctly.
Yeah.
And so by the time they're done, they're so wholesome, and they're so much more prepared to actually lead someone and start a family.
Right.
Because biology.
This is Andrey Ivanov, a new friend, but someone who's becoming one of the most influential people that I know of right now in my life, because he's a source of hope. You're a source of hope when people are desperately searching for hope. And I don't know why now, but it just seems to be now there's a time, this is a great time to infuse hope into a generation. And so I'm excited about what you're doing, what God's doing in you and through you, and how it's evolving. And I'm really honored to be part of the process right now. So it's as a friend, Andrey, thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you, Pastor Jeff.
Yeah.
It's quite an honor and a privilege to meet someone who hasn't quit, and someone who's worked their whole life and wanted to and done the work and chooses to not give up on humanity. I appreciate that, because it's easy to quit.
Yeah. Let's don't quit together.
Yeah. So it's a real privilege to be
So
here.
when I was first introduced to you, a mutual friend said, you got to meet this guy. And because some of the stuff that he's thinking about and talking about is extraordinary. And so then I went and looked up your name and your website, and it says Flash Love. What is world is Flash Love? And that was a while back. Is it still Flash Love, or is it morphed into something different than that? What was Flash Love when you started?
Well, we've adapted a lot since then,
Yeah.
but the core, the root, is still the same, and the heart is the same.
Yeah.
And so Flash Love was really born out of an action. Now 11 years ago, my brothers and I, as we were kind of coming out of this lifestyle of living for ourselves, and we grew up in a good home and in a good environment, and so coming out of this, like, living for ourselves and the weekends and all that, we're like, what in the world? Or like, why does every weekend look the same? Why does our lives feel so mundane right now? And so we were all in our 20s. And so we saw something on the news at the time that just really irked me and my brothers. And so there was this thing that was going around called a knockout game, where youth were like running around and beating up people on the streets and taking their money, taking their possessions, filming them, and then running away laughing. And to me, it just grossed me out. And so a part of you gets really angry, and then the other part is, you ask yourself a question. Well, it's like, what am I doing, about this? Like, who was not there for them that didn't set the example for them? So I can't sit there and point fingers if I'm not doing anything about it. So that was kind of the genesis of what we of the emotion that started it. And so what we did was, we're like, you know what? If people can do these random events, flash mob. And so social media was just, becoming a thing. Yeah. And so they would gather and totally random people, and they would rob a Minute Mart. Sometimes they would sing, sometimes they would dance, which, kind of these, benign, events, which I guess could be also cool, but they were also doing harm. And so for us, we wanted to, involve the church. So we put together an event in an elder community where people are still living independently, not a senior home. So, but in a community that's just older. And so we, it was about the fall season. So there was a lot of leaves in the yards, and we're like, let's just do something nice for people. And so we went around all these churches and gathered, 58 people showed up to a coffee shop. Told them to bring rakes, gloves, and shovels, and we went and served 25 homes in an hour and a half. Yeah. And people were just so alive and so excited about that. Before the event ended, they were asking us like, "Hey, when's the next one?" I'm like, I don't know, I barely emotionally survived this one. Like I couldn't talk in front of people. So to me, that was a challenge. So that was the beginning. And
That's a great genesis, though, and
Yeah.
I think you've held on to that. Let's try to do something that's going to make a difference.
Yes, very, very, it's very, very fast paced. And I noticed that was kind of the trick, like let's leave all the rules and all the red tape out of this thing and just make it just raw.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, show up at this place, bring this stuff, we're going to do this thing. And we had, in the first event, we had over 13 churches.
Yeah.
People, meaning youth from 13 churches that came out and served.
Yeah.
And
Before we
it
get into
really caught a lot.
Where you're at right now, which is really exciting, and I want to spend some time there. Talk a little bit about who you are, a little bit about your background. You talked a little bit about the family you came out of, but who are you, Andrey? I mean, like, what makes you who you are?
I'm not very different in this particular way. I was hungry for truth.
Yeah.
And every single time someone would make a statement, wherever it came from, whether it's from outside or inside a family or a community like the church community, Jesus made it very clear. It's like it's their actions that are actually going to show who they are. Therefore, whatever ideology we happen to believe, whatever doctrine we choose to believe. So when something was said and then you accept it because you don't know what else to base it on. Sometimes you're just left hanging. And so for me, it was this search for truth. I'm like, well, if I'm hearing this, but I'm not seeing the thing that you claim, to speak,
Right.
then there's something off. Either the doctrine's wrong or I'm missing something else, And so it was that search, that hunger for truth that at one point pushed me away. And then that time being alone really made me look for it even when it was incomplete. So who am I? I come from Kiev, Ukraine. My family's we're immigrants. At least half my family, because the other half was born here. So seven of us kids came here from a crumbling, collapsing Soviet Union, the empire that fell on its knees. And loving parents that were like running into the new world, like this fearful place that we were always warned about not to collude with, right? And so we come to the United States and we were embraced with open arms. People didn't know us, but somehow, there was a home, there was a church that adopted us. I mean, it was just the most amazing, thing. It was like heaven. Like my dad, for the first time, I remember he was sharing, he was walking through the mall and he was hearing Christian music playing over the speakers in a public space, and he sobbed.
Yeah.
Like to him, it touched him so much, and so I was raised with this gratitude of this amazing place called America, and yet my mom was always very fearful of the government because that was under the boot that we lived under there.
Yeah.
So grew up, very sheltered, with that regard. Some things were good, some things not so much. But it all kind of played itself out. And then eventually, when I finally got up on my feet and I started to tread in this world, I mean, I was naive to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And to some degree, you may think that is good and it has its, benefits, but in others, it leaves a lot of blind sides. And so you walk out and all of a sudden you get swiped by the steam train, and like, what in the world happened? Oh, there's drugs. Oh, there's this. Oh, there's that. Oh, there's this fast life. And it's like, well, it's kind of scary, but it's kind of liberating, And it's like, and so what do you try?
Or at least exciting.
Yeah. What do you do? And so that's like, I remember treading that territory and getting close to some places that I, now I'm like, oh my gosh, and always keeping in the back of my mind, that my parents love me and are praying for me.
Yeah.
And so it was that kind of, upbringing. And so, in my mid to late 20s, I began to really ask myself this question, like, why am I here? What's this meaning and purpose to life?
Yeah.
And so that's what began to really kind of stir this new thing. Like I was, so I'm one of 13 kids. I'm third from the top in the pecking order, and so I had this train of brothers and sisters that I felt co-responsible for.
Yeah.
And in the family, in a large family, I don't know if what family background you come from. after the third kid, like it doesn't really become harder. There's just more mouths.
Yeah, it just gets blurry.
Because it's the older ones that are now changing the diapers, babysitting, and feeding, and mom just breastfeeds. So
Constantly.
it was an early growing up.
Yeah.
Very healthy, I think. Very healthy to mature quick.
Yeah.
So a lot of that really replicated in some of the things.
And
that
you're
we do
also
today.
a father,
Yes.
and a husband.
Yes, I'm
Yourself. You've got your own
yes.
family.
Yes, it's been a journey. I'm married for now a little over 8 years, and I have a beautiful little girl, little Josie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What does your wife think of you?
she thinks I'm nuts. My wife thinks I'm nuts, and
There's a reason why she thinks that.
well, the pastor who counseled us, he did say, you know who you're marrying. He says, this man has a vision and he has a calling on his life. Be careful about how you make the next step.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a lot.
Yeah. She said yes to a lot.
She did.
So what's your vision? What's the picture you're looking at, Andrey? What's in front of you? I mean, we can talk a lot about how you got here,
Yeah.
but I think what I'm most intrigued with is how you're going to possibly bring all this into one and paint one picture out of everything God's been doing the last 15 years to bring you to this place. What's right in front of you right now?
I appreciate this question. I've pondered most of my adult life on this question, even before I was awake to my calling, to my purpose. What's the vision? Well, the vision is to undo the things that were done wrong. And, there's a lot of ways you can look at this, right?
Yeah.
There is one way that creates massive disruption and heats up in ways it shouldn't. And there's other ways that are ethical ways that Jesus would have done it in. And Jesus was a disruptor.
Yeah.
And he was a major disruptor in a culture and in a time when he was here. So disrupting is a good thing. How do we do it ethically and then not create the tyrants we want to steer away from is another.
And how do you get the result that Jesus would get?
Right. So ideologies are great, but how do you manifest them in a way that brings good?
Yeah.
And so that's the big challenge, right? Gosh, I'm just trying to even think like which angle am I going to come at this from? For me, the thing that really started me was I saw a huge potential in a youth.
Yeah.
And I saw the procrastination and the delay of them maturing into adulthood.
You're talking about mainly young men, right?
I started with young men.
Yeah.
Yes. I related to them, so I could work with that. So the vision was, how do we equip them to become responsible adults? I mean, that's where the start was, right?
Right.
Because if we could equip them, then they could be such an asset to society. So we don't have a growing babysitting club, but a functional group of ambitious and energetic and strong group of individuals who have such a big part to play.
Right.
But instead we're babysitting them and then hiring more counselors. Like, that's unsustainable.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, I saw this massive need, and I'm going to loop it together, this massive need of growing single motherhood because the boys never grew up.
Yeah.
So like there's a missing link, and so it's this perpetual cycle of creating more boyhood, even though they're bigger, like they look like adults, right? And then you have the elderly who are kind of shunned to the side and treated like, well, we're done with you, so like go over there and hurry up, give us your assets.
Yeah.
Attitude in a society. And so it's like you look at all these things and it's like and the men are just kind of, the men who are like just kind of stuck somewhere in between. They're just working their lives away and they don't even have time. And I'm like, what is wrong with this picture? Like this seems so disconnected, so disjointed.
And dysfunctional.
Yes, very dysfunctional. It's like where do you begin? And so I was like, okay, so housing is, unaffordable. Like that's kind of step one. And even when you buy a house, now you have to work 1.5 or 2 jobs to just sustain, this
Right.
ridiculous payment. And so anyways, like I'm just kind of, prodding this. And so the vision is to care for our most vulnerable. And so the most vulnerable would be our women, children, and our elderly. And how we can do that is with these youth who we can equip and invite into manhood, and then say, hey, can you help us help them? But by the way, while you're helping them, we will teach you how to lead yourself. We will teach you how to take responsibility. We will teach you how to think and have complex thoughts and be able to process big ideas. But we'll also teach you how to create an income, and we'll teach you how to build your own house. So this seems audacious. I know it's a lot. And so, of course, now we
But
have...
it's hopeful. There's vision there. I mean, that's...
And it sounds good.
Yeah.
But how do you implement it? So we have these massive forest fires, right? So I met this man. I'm not going to go into the story, nor who he is, but comes from a very, very interesting background. An intellectual and a doer on levels in scale I've never seen or heard anyone else in my life. And he really helped me deconstruct a lot of the stuff that was so hidden and not taught, in the school system, not opened, to the general public. And he says, oh, by the way, this vision that you're talking about, I have the other missing link. He says, let me teach you how to take this this burnt down forest that you have heard about, and let me take you to a place, and I want to show you something. So he invites me to this, Central Oregon, to this middle of nowhere kind of thing, where one of the big fires were raging, and he showed me this entire operation. He says, I have been preparing for my army to arrive. And of course, I've already been working with youth for a good 8 years at the time. And so he shows me this operation where he's helping, elderly, reclaim or recover their properties after this massive burn, their houses, all the trees that are still burnt standing up. So he helped them clean up the property so they could, restart their life, or at least sell it and move somewhere else. And he showed me all these machinery. He showed me all these plans, all this engineering. He says, your youth who you're working with, let me help you meet that need. Let me help you with all of this. And so, of course, it took me some time to vet him and see if he was a real deal, and he turned out to be. And so now we're taking this massive burnt down forest that has over 13 million homes worth of trees that are standing and allowed to rot because the state doesn't know what to do with them, and they actually don't want to solve the real problem because they can't tax the citizens with it.
Right.
So they won't necessarily give it away to people who can do something with it. So through very, very, brilliant people and that understand the law, that understand that, the process, we've really been able to refine everything and have a functional plan where we train the youth how to build homes. In the meantime, they're helping us care for elderly. I mean, I can go, story up on story up on story of elderly who are living in conditions that are just inhumane, and there's no one to care for them. There's no family, there's no community support, there's no nothing, and the home is rotting, and so is the individual.
Yeah.
Bottom up and inside out. And it's like, how can we care for all of these? And then we have all these single mothers, who are raising their children, can't even dream of owning their own home, working 2-3 jobs. Like, it's unsustainable. Like, we are on a collision course with reality, and it doesn't look pretty.
Right.
And we're already seeing some pretty strong glimpses of what that looks like. So we've built out this process in the last, really effectively in the last 2.5 years. And so now we have this functional plan where we created this leadership school, where we created this housing program that teaches them how to, in 1 year, go through this process, learn how to build their own home. In the meantime, like, they're learning how to read blueprints, they're learning how to read and use all these different machineries and manuals, and by the time they're done, they qualify all their hours, and we give them a piece of land to build their home on in this micro farm community. As we're buying these farms, in acreages really, and creating these micro farm communities, they're learning how to, do all this stuff. Now they get a piece of land, they build their own home, and in the meantime, they've each individual roughly helps us build about 40 homes for our women and children and elders.
That's a huge picture. Talk about Spartan training.
So here's what I tell young women. The guys who go through our training, they're going to be the creme de la creme. Like, we fizzle out. We wash out those who are selfish, those who can't work in a team. We phase out those who can't work. We phase out those who are like need another level of care. Not because we don't want to work with them, but because we don't have the resources to work with everyone.
Right.
So what we do is we have this filtration process. It's a very intense 5-week course. It used to be 10 weeks. We condensed it. The hours actually increased, but the duration decreased. And so they go through this course where they're, they learn how to work as a team. It's mentally, physically, emotionally incredibly grueling. So it's a selection process in a way, and a lot of my military background really played a role in this, and then a deep psychological understanding and study of what creates and develops a really strong human being. And so what we do is we simply invite them to level up, step into this new environment that is really exemplifies what we would like to think of as manhood,
right?
Where a man takes full responsibility for himself and his environment, right? Where he begins to think in an ethical way, not in an alligator or crocodile kind of a everything's for me type. And so by the time they're done, they are functional human beings. I mean, they're faster, they are more resilient, they learn how to work in a team, and so we now have a solid group of people who we invite into the next layer. Hey, next layer, now let's teach you to build a house.
Well, that's I think what you're doing that most people miss is they want to see transformation happen on an individual basis and maybe even in a group. But then after they're finished, they don't really have anything for them to do.
Yeah.
It's like we've invested all this energy into creating the kind of person that's going to really be helpful in society, but then they don't have anything for them to do. You have something for them to do.
Yes, sir.
This is going somewhere.
They don't want to eat Tide Pods.
No.
They're just bored out of their mind.
Yeah.
And the public school system hasn't done, a lot of justice because they're bored out of their mind. Like, I was bored. It's like awesome teachers, great people. I was bored out of my mind because the curriculum was so pathetic.
Yeah.
It was so single-minded. It's like, hey, I have this learning style. It's not that one. So don't call me stupid because I didn't, I wasn't the fish that didn't learn how to climb a tree. Like, okay, let's judge everybody, right?
Yeah.
There's all these different learning styles, and so we're losing waves of youth because the school got stuck in a certain way.
Yeah.
And so that's the key, to really open this massive potential, and they run towards it.
Yeah.
Like, you put them through the most grueling environment and they run towards it. I was surprised how many women showed up. Like we opened the door to girls to go through the process, and how many girls went through and excelled in it. And we didn't lower the bar for them. I mean, some physical aspect of upper chest, let's say, to do a push-up, like we dropped that to adjust, to their physique, but we didn't lower the standard for them in any real way. And just to see them excel, and I was like, wow, I think we're really on to something.
Yeah.
So that was
So what do you do with
big
them
breakthrough
once they've gone through the training?
So
what's next for them?
So once they go through the training, then they go into this advanced leadership course, and so it's a year-long course where we're really teaching them how to think, not what to think, how to think, how to deconstruct a big thing. Or anytime someone throws a statement at you, it's like, don't take it for its face value. Learn how to think, and if you think in this way, you will stop making big mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, it will really take you places, and people will look at you different, and actually, trust and honor your word, and I mean, it'll build you into something more. So we kind of start with that, and then we teach them. So part of that course is the timber frame school. So they're simultaneously going through that. Of course, the physical requirements. That doesn't get easier. We just make them better. So we tell them, things are not going to be easier for you. You'll just become better. And so
keep that standard really high.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so they're very physically engaged. They're very mentally engaged. They're crushing their assignments as they're running this parallel life. They're presenting all the time. I mean, this is one of the things that I miss so greatly growing up, is I wasn't pushed to face my fear of public speaking.
Yeah.
When you can speak like you have a sword, when you can shape people's opinions and do it ethically and do it correctly and based on data, like you can shape your culture. I mean, isn't that the goal? We have like, look at our culture. It's our culture that dictates, how things run going forward. How can we combat that without violently trying to like manifest something?
Yeah.
How can we do it ethically? And we can. And people are hungry for truth, hungry for meaning. So we teach them, kind of the holistic approach. And so we introduce them to law. We introduce them how to read, how to read it, how to understand it, how to constructively deliver it. And it's a holistic course. And so of course when they finish that one, then we invite them into the next layer. And so it's just training the future leaders, training those future politicians, those future business owners, those future missionaries who are going to go out, to the ends of the earth and not be like, well, I don't know what to say because I don't have my lawyer with me.
Right.
No, you should understand that. That's a very basic thing. Like if you cannot defend your rights, do you really have them at all? Right? So we teach them how to become a sovereign individual so they can actually function in a society and function well and be able to defend others. Here's a critical slogan that we have embraced, and that is Isaiah 1:17. And that is learn to do good.
Yeah.
It's not a suggestion.
Right.
Right?
Stop doing evil.
Yeah.
Learn to do good.
Learn to do good.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's
I
so
love it.
Yeah, so it's this approach of, it's a command, learn to do good. I just lost. I have to pull it up now. Seek justice, rebuke the oppressor,
right.
Defend the fatherless, and plead for the widow. Like, can we invite and raise up a generation that has that kind of a mindset where it's like, well, there's some stuff going on. Someone's taking advantage of an elder, but I got a sports game to be at. No, you don't have a sports game to be at. You have someone to defend.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's legally, sometimes it's physically, sometimes it's financially or another means. Sometimes it's simply providing care for them. Can we do that? And so the generation we're raising we're inviting them to that, because in James 1:27. It says the pure and undefiled religion before God is
right.
this, right? And to care for widows, and
and not just to know that, but
and
actually
to keep oneself
do that.
unspotted from the world. Like that is so critical. And so that's the kind of generation that we're bringing up. And what I see is the ones who see, and the ones who want more meaning to life, they take this call.
So what you're going to do is you've got a vision to accomplish some things. And before you set out to accomplish those things, you're equipping a generation with values that are missing so that they can do the thing you're about to call them into, right?
Yes, sir.
And you're about to call them into cutting timbers.
That's the practical.
Isn't it crazy? Because you'd think you were going to start a law school or something, but you're actually calling them to create material to build houses with.
That's where it begins, because when you see someone sweat, and you see someone bang up their knuckles, and you see someone get out of their frustrated mind and how to operate this piece of equipment, and then work in the rain and in the mud and help us recover a farm. And in the meantime, they're learning they're studying the laws that we are complying with. So their mind is like opening up to, whoa, I had no idea that this is how you do it and how you do it correctly.
Yeah.
And so by the time they're done, they're so wholesome, and they're so much more prepared to actually lead someone and start a family.
Right.
Because biology, unfortunately, doesn't sit there and wait, be like, is this guy qualified to be a father?
Yeah.
No, it just makes you a father. So how do you not tell them with no good result, by the way, to, stay celibate, and instead be like, hey, let me teach you how to be a father at 15 years old.
Yeah.
Right? Let me teach you what that responsibility comes with. So by the way, when you have, that situation, you approach it very, very differently. You approach it as a young adult, as an adult, like a man, right? For a male. And not just be like, well, this guy on TikTok, like this is what he looks like and this is what he did, and so therefore I am. So it really comes at, and we speak in this sort of method. We use it's a military type of approach. It's called HARD: honest, appropriate, respectful, and direct. And so we communicate in that kind of way. And what it does is it's very in your face. We don't beat around the bush, but what it does is it straightens them up. And it's like, and if you have issues, then maybe this is not for you yet.
Yeah. What do you want to build?
I want to build a healthy community where babies arrive with the power of choice. And what that looks like is surrounding them with a multi-generational household.
Yeah.
Where grandma is educating the mother, even if she's not her blood grandma, right? She's educating the mother and she's educating the baby because she has so much to offer. She has so much to give. And by the way, her longevity is determined on that. Science says when an elderly woman, or postmenopause woman, I should say, not elderly, hears the cry of a baby, they live up to 20 years longer. And not just longer, healthier. Because her body is releasing growth hormones. In just that moment, in just that encounter, that interaction. I mean, I recently.
That's so significant.
Yeah, I took my little Josie. She's 6 months now, and she's like so alert and so awake, and she's so excited about the world, And so I bring this little bundle of joy, into the senior home. I have a friend who lives in one in Vancouver, and you should have seen what happened in that place. I mean, I walked through a memory care unit before I got to the upper floor where all the other folks were living, and it was like this hallway of all these people in wheelchairs on benches and these armchairs or whatever, just talking, some sleeping, and just this mostly quiet. And it was like the room just came alive, and they were like getting up out of their chairs and just like walking up and just wanted to touch her.
Yeah.
And just her smile, like the whole room just lit up, down this long hallway that we were walking, they just lit up. I mean, she was like this little star, and she brought them so much joy just with her presence. So why deprive them of that joy, and why deprive her of their knowledge that they still have to give?
Right.
And so creating these multi-generational communities where people have an ability to grow their own food and farm their own land and be, in this one with nature, you will finally begin to invite the most indoor generation of ever and invite them to experience God's creation and its glory.
Yeah.
Now they have a meaning and purpose, to live. And
Well,
by the way,
it's mostly about proximity, right?
Sure.
It's just bringing these groups of people into proximity with each other.
Well, don't get me into the zoning laws because I'll start to speak on that. There's a whole lot to say on that, but I'll leave it for another time.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of positive things happening on the legal front, by the way. One of those things is the zoning laws. So that whole victory that has happened, where they deregulated the zoning. When I say deregulated, really set it back and corrected it.
What you're talking about is a separation.
I'm talking the
zoning
single family zoning.
Yeah.
It was by design meant to separate people.
Yeah.
In its nature, it was very, very racist because it was made to keep the blacks and Asians out of white neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So why would we have doctrine like that in 2023? I mean, it's insane. It's embarrassing. So what they did simultaneously was, well, now grandma can't live at home. So now the child has to leave at 18. Like, what in the world?
Yeah.
That's not a healthy family, right? And so beautiful things are happening. And so when we have 14-year-old kids young men, right, and young women who have the ability to earn their own home and never pay a rent bill, never have to make a mortgage payment. Do you realize the power of that?
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden they got like a 50% income increase, or 80% in some of their cases because it's so expensive. Or they have their own space for the first time ever because they had to share a room with 3 other people, right? So that dorm mindset, I mean, imagine where it comes from when they're, learning from all the dumb ideas, and everybody's just kind of doing their own thing just to survive because life is so miserable. Now all of a sudden they have meaning and purpose because they have to work half the amount and they get to live 3 times more.
Yeah.
Like that's a winning ticket. So that's why I keep saying, like, we're preparing for a wave of parents to send their children and youth to come in and learn how to become an adult and have a meaning and purpose to their life.
And you're talking about building a community like that. So you're taking
many
young people that are energetic, no values, giving them values, setting them to work with a common vision to build small communities where the things that you were just talking about can begin to manifest as part of the culture of that community. Describe what those communities look like. Just give me
some of them are couch potatoes, so they're not all energetic when they come in. But they come.
You got to start somewhere.
They leave transformed. So what does a community look like? So imagine a little Airbnb community somewhere out in nature, where they're kind of hybrids. So a portion of it becomes an elder care, right? Because many of these farms we're buying from the elderly.
Right.
And so what we do is we buy it from the elderly, but we never kick the elder off. We actually give them a lifetime tenancy to live on their own property.
Right.
Right? And so we build an additional housing for other elders. So now we've created a community, and we build a home for a nurse. So there's now a nurse on site. The nurse gets to inherit her house after a certain time that she served, like 5 to 10 years, depending on what the contract would look like. And so all of this stuff is being completed or has already been done and ready to go. We're currently recovering our first farm and looking at 3 more to purchase, one of them pretty close to here. And so there's this elder care side of things. What that does is it opens up the other side of the property for us to build additional housing for our mothers who are just simply looking for a place to lay their head and just be safe, right?
Right.
So there's going to be another nurse that lives on site, a community center for the community events, whether it's caring for like a children care co-op, a place to study, etc. And so mothers can escape into this place and stabilize. And the intent is to help them go through, let's say they want to, pursue an additional education. And so they want to get a nursing degree, because if they get a nursing degree, now they can go and care for an elder, right? Not just leave them in a CNA, but get a nursing degree. And I know this sounds ambitious, it's like, okay, how are you going to do that? Hey, I got trees. Like I have a mountain of trees, and we have a means to turn them into very, very financially lucrative solution, and
Right.
we're already doing it.
Right.
So when she, gets educated and she graduates, whether it's from a trade school or from a nursing school or other, whatever she, chooses that will help her stand on her own 2 feet. Now what we do is we sell her a home in a co-ed community where it's not just isolated group of women, but where she can have, a functional marriage and et cetera. We sell her a home for 50% of its value, and we give her a 7-year bridge loan to pay off.
Yeah.
Like, we have the means to do that.
Yeah, you're not talking, this is not on paper. I mean, it is on paper, but it's not just on paper.
It's
This
real.
is not theoretical. You've
This
actually
is as real
have the
as
engineers, the lawyers,
as the splinters
support people.
and the paperwork. Like we are now in mass production phase, and it's just going to keep spinning up and going faster.
Yeah.
Like right now we're working in the rain because we don't have a functional shop to work in.
Yeah.
But I know that time is coming, because as more people will kind of see how real this is and how many people it actually has the means to help. I mean, what I'm talking about is at a scale that the whole nation can get involved in. Like the whole nation. Truly. We have CNAs right now who are working one or multiple jobs who will never dream to own a house. The CNAs who are going through our training meaning who have a CNA, let's say, certification and are caring for an elder, in 5 years she earns her own house.
Right.
How can I say that? Well, we have the trees, we have the land, and we're buying more. So imagine when she is working and she doesn't have to not see her kids while she's just paying the bills. Imagine now she has her little box.
Yeah.
And in a house that is built to a 200-year standard, because that's an ethical way to build housing, and give them an ability to pass that wealth to, from generation to generation. I mean, there's so many unethical things that have been done that got us to the place that we're in right now. And most of it is truly from greed. And I'm not talking capitalism greed. I'm just talking greed, right? Capitalism is a system. It's a way to have a transaction. But it's the ethics that people have left, in the other room, or never had them in the first place. They violated human rights, and so when you build building material that emits formaldehyde and poisons the mind of a mother, or the utero of a mother, the health of a mother, and therefore the mind of the child, like, how's that ethical?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a cheaper way, it saves, 3% on the building material. Why? So we do things very, very differently. Everything is designed very, very differently to care for. So going back to your question, we have an elder care. We have, communities where women can come to and stabilize and not have to live in those abusive environments, or in the street, or worse. I don't know if there is worse, but I'm sure there is. And so they have a place to stabilize. They have a way to have their, a place to have their kids, safely cared for. They have a way to get additional education and then come out on the other side totally, in control of their own, destiny, and being able to go forward. Like, isn't that the biblical definition of
Caring
love
for
your
orphans.
neighbor?
Well, caring for orphans.
Sure.
Too, yeah.
The biblical definition of caring for your, widows and orphans, and loving your neighbor. Like, Jesus just reduced it to these two.
Yeah.
Love your God with all your heart, right? With all your mind and all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
And in that simplicity, I sit down and talk with people on the other side of the aisle, and I share with them a heart in what we're doing. And they're asking me, where do I fit in? Where can I roll up my sleeves and work? I love what you were doing.
Yeah.
There's nothing divisive about this, because it wasn't supposed to be divisive. It's the people who want to control me and them and someone else who find reasons and ways how we shouldn't talk to one another. We're talking about, in America, a one people, a globe, a one people. So,
well, and Andrey, you're not talking about building an organization, which is typically the way that people approach things nowadays. Is they want to build something, but they want to build it for themselves first, and then they want to let other people have some of it. But you're talking about changing culture.
Yes, sir.
By building. You're building things to change a culture, not for yourself, but for other people. And
yes, sir.
Everything you seem to be doing is equipping people to make a difference themselves, and not just have you make a difference for them, but you can make a difference yourself. And the hope that's in that is really powerful.
That's the lasting change. When you come up to someone and you equip them, you empower them, what you've created is someone who can actually build a generation, build a legacy for their family, and actually stand up and affect masses of people behind them.
Yeah.
Instead of, giving them just enough so I'm important in their life. Like, there's no time for that.
Yeah.
I'm too small, and my time is too short to be here. And it took God some time to deconstruct anything inside of myself that would have used it for other means. And I'm very grateful for this humble place.
Yeah, I'm grateful that you said yes and gave yourself over to that discipline that process he's taking you through. Also, where things are going is not just a pipe dream, but like you were telling me the other day when we were having a conversation about this, that you're about ready to create a documentary that will paint a much bigger, much more intense picture of what you're talking about. And that when that happens, people are going to come from everywhere and want to be involved in this, because they're going to see the hope that's in it and the potential that's in it for change.
Well, yes. And the big thing is when when someone hears it, not from me now, but they hear it from a 16-year-old young man who says, here's what my life was before this. Look at me now. And I have my own home. I've taken responsibility for my life. I'm not a gamer. I'm not a this. I'm not all these things. I am choosing to care for and accept responsibility for another individual, and when you marry, you actually accept the whole family, and everybody else kind of involved.
Yeah.
So they've built themselves a space to now have this healthy family, and when people hear from this, you're how old and you own this $150,000 asset or more, like that's unheard of.
Right.
That's the story that's actually going to seal this deal. That's the story that people are going to be like, you know what, this guy sounds nuts, but looking at that, yes,
yeah,
I will take the bet, and I will place everything. Like I will go all in, because I want my son or my daughter to be around someone like that, and to create something as good as what this individual happens to have. And then we'll do another story on the elder who's about to receive her first home. She's living in this box with a collapsing roof and a caving-in floor in her bathroom, and she showers outside. This is a Christian woman in our community, and she's rotting. How dare I allow that to happen?
right.
So when people hear her story and see her emotion and see her life changed, and they're like, and we have more?
Yeah.
Not just more elders living in similar or worse conditions, but we have more wood to care for all of them.
Yeah.
You see, now this prosperity gospel is like, it's very different. I'm saying we actually have enough resources to care for all of them. Do we have enough ethics and ownership and foresight
Right.
and hard work to do the right thing?
Yeah.
That's the bigger question.
Well, it's interesting because we've had these conversations enough for me to think it's easy for people to look at you, Andrey, and think, this kid's brilliant. But I'm smart enough to know that the God who's telling you this stuff is brilliant, and the God who's calling you up to this higher level of achievement is brilliant. And the inspiration and ideas that he's given you to not just think about what could possibly happen, but actually do things. God is amazing. The God
Yes,
that's
sir.
behind all this is amazing.
When we actually believe
and I
him.
think when people begin to see that God can do things through us that we can't even imagine, they're going to start saying yes more often. They're going to believe more often. They're going to have more faith, and they're going to have trust. And I can't wait to see where this goes. I mean, I hope I get to see 14, 15, 20, 30, 40 of these communities established, and just begin to see God manifest the hope in these new communities that you've envisioned begin to happen, and see lives change. I think it's really gonna give people faith that they have wanted for a long time.
5 years from now, this region is going to be unrecognizable. 5 years.
That's crazy.
Due to the multiplication process of this. We're talking about creating an entire industry that is not influenced by national and international economics.
Yeah.
Where we bring the supply chain home and create entire industries that were never here. So we're not hoping China doesn't close their borders.
Yeah.
Or some tariffs stop China from sending cheap goods. Hey, we're going to create them here. We have enough automation. We have enough wisdom. We have enough intellectual infrastructure. We have enough resources. And we have this little thing called contract law that we can utilize, and we will, and we do.
Yeah.
And what that does is it makes us impenetrable to outside influences, and I mean that. So commerce can function, and people who never would have thought of owning their own business, they will own their own business, and they will produce parts that will help this process, and this person will be empowered, and we'll invest into this person, not shake them down for every bit of interest, for loaning them money, but we'll actually invest it in them and not, practice usury, and equip them to build a legacy for their family as they will empower this next process and this next process and this next process. So we have the means to actually equip every functional human beings, and all the other stuff that we don't like to do, we'll just give it to automation.
When we sat down to do this, I knew it would be a problem. because like, where do you end? Because this could go, even the things that you've shared today are like, I don't know, a 20th of what you've shared with me. There's so much more, and there's a lot to talk about, but we have to end it someplace. We have to wrap this up sometime. But I'm really glad, I'm really thankful that you're doing what you're doing, because it's given me inspiration to do the things that God's called me to do. I want to step up my game too. Just listening to you and watching you maneuver your way through all the things that you're doing right now. I just really appreciate you, Andrey. Thank you so much.
Likewise, it's an absolute privilege to be here and to have a friend like you.
Yeah.
Pastor Jeff, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.